viewers of WISC-TV, News 3 Now presents a debate between Madison mayoral candidates Satya Rhodes-Conway and Gloria Reyes. Here's moderator Eric Franke.
Good evening and welcome from our host WISC-TV and the Capital Times. We are proud to sponsor this debate between the candidates for Madison mayor. On Tuesday, April 4th, Wisconsin voters will choose between these two candidates. Satya Rhodes-Conway, now completing her first term as Madison's 58th mayor and previously served 3 terms on the Madison City Council. Gloria Reyes is challenging her and has previously served as deputy mayor under previous mayor Paul Soglin and as president of the Madison Metropolitan School Board, and is also a former Madison police officer. Thanks to both of you for your participation. And here are the rules for this debate, to which everyone has agreed. We will have 1 minute opening and closing remarks. After our opening remarks, we will then have questions from News 3 Now's investigative reporter Naomi Coles, as well as Cap Times local government reporter Allison Garfield. At the request of the Reyes campaign, out of concerns for bias, the questions were also submitted for a third-party review to Neil Heinen, WISC's former editorial director and a current member of the advisory board for UW Center for Journalism Ethics. The public has been polled for questions as well, a few of which will appear in this debate. The questions will be directed at a specific candidate who will then have 90 seconds to answer, followed by the option for one 60-second rebuttal from the other candidate, with the option for a second rebuttal if they target their opponent by name. Both Naomi and Allison will have the right to ask any follow-ups or clarifying questions as needed, with candidates then having 60 seconds to answer a follow-up question. Candidates can see the time they have right in front of them. The order of response for our opening and closing statements was determined just moments ago by coin toss. Ms. Reyes won the coin flip and chose to have the final closing argument. Mayor Rhodes-Conway has the first opening statement. Mayor Rhodes-Conway, the floor is yours for a 1-minute opening statement.
Well, thank you all very much, and thanks everybody for tuning in. It is great to be here. 4 years ago, Madison voted for change. Madison voted for a mayor that would take our housing crisis seriously, that would invest in public transit, that would tackle the climate crisis, and infuse racial equity into everything that the city does. 9 months into my first term, the pandemic hit. But we have made progress on all of those fronts, despite that. And out of the pandemic, we have new priorities: public safety, traffic safety, investing in equitable economic development, and supporting our young people. Over the past years, I've defended our democracy. I've invested in access to reproductive health care, and I'm proud to be endorsed by Planned Parenthood. I've balanced budgets, and I've brought in over $400 million thanks to Congressman Mark Pocan, who's also endorsed me. I'm excited to be running for a second term.
Mayor Rhodes-Conway, thank you very much. Ms. Reyes, your opening statement, 1 minute.
Hello, good evening. First, I want to thank God who's watching over me today. I want to thank my mom who's watching from home, and I want to thank my dad as well who's watching over me from heaven today. As a daughter of migrant farm workers, we struggle significantly with poverty and homelessness. And I have committed my entire career to give back to a community that never gave up on me and my family. I am proud of my accomplishments serving this community in public service. I developed innovative strategies to ensure that our residents felt safe in their community. Worked with community safety strategies to reduce and divert young people away from the criminal justice system. I continued to work as school board president during the most tumultuous times in recent history. And then I was able to ensure that young people had a safe place to go. I am a proud product of this community. People have asked me to run for mayor because they know that I care about the residents of this city, and they know that I am experienced to run the city.
Thank you, Ms. Reyes. Appreciate it. Now, for our questions, we begin with Allison from the Cap Times. A question for both candidates. Allison?
Yes. We're going to start with a question about your previous leadership. So what would you say has been your biggest misstep in a leadership role, and how have you learned from that? Let's begin with you, Ms. Reyes.
I would say when I was served on the Madison School Board, we developed a policy. It was an anti-racist policy. We were experiencing a culture where all of a sudden people wanted to say the N-word in our schools. And so we developed a policy that no one can use the N-word. And so the N-word had been used. There was a security officer that said the N-word, but in response to someone calling him the N-word. And this was a challenging time. And so we developed a policy that impacted the entire school. And there's some things that we have to learn from that, and to ensure that we are not having unintended consequences on the policies that we develop.
Thank you, Ms. Reyes. Same question for Mayor Rhodes-Conway.
Thank you. It's a great question. When I was on the city council, in your first year, you're sort of learning the ropes, and coming into my first budget as a city council member, I was approached by several really great nonprofit organizations in our community who asked me to basically put funding in the budget for them. And I thought, well, gosh, these are people that are doing great work in our community, and we should absolutely fund them. And so I forwarded amendments and learned in the process of both those amendments and others that it really pays to talk with staff first, and that if you are going to do a favor for one organization, you should probably expect a lot of organizations to come knocking on your door. Since then, we've actually put a lot of effort into reforming the way that we do amendments on the city council, and to delegating a lot of the authority on our community development decisions to the Community Services Committee, so that we have a fair process and an equitable process, rather than decisions being made on the fly in the city council meetings. So I learned a lot going through my first city budget, and I'm really proud that ever since then we've cleaned up our city budget process, we've infused racial equity, and as mayor I've delivered balanced budgets every year, and we're asking about racial equity in every single one of our programs and projects, and that's a really big priority for me in our budgeting process.
Mayor Rhodes-Conway, thank you very much. For our next question, we turn to News 3 Now reporter Naomi Coles. Naomi?
So we asked the community what they wanted to know ahead of this debate, and not surprisingly, perhaps one of the most common themes was housing. So this question is specifically for Ms. Reyes, with an opportunity for response from Mayor Rhodes-Conway. What specific policies would you offer to increase home ownership rates for lower and middle income residents?
I think one of the things that we have to work with is our nonprofit organizations. We have to work with our communities of color. We have to work with our nonprofit organizations, and such as Empower program, that really helps divert and prepare Black families and brown families into home ownership, and that is working. So I want to look at our Business Economic Development Center and increase budget, and put a budget amendment, and put in my budget proposal that we increase funding for the business center to ensure that we are moving Black families into home ownership. Right now, but we have to build more single-family homes. There's a recent zoning ordinance that eliminated single-family homes in our city, and it is causing significant burden. And that we have to really provide policies and budgets to help support our Black and brown families and close the racial disparity gaps in our city.
Thank you, Ms. Reyes. Next question is from Allison for the mayor.
Response from the mayor.
The mayor, would you like to respond to any of that? If you do, just signal me with your hand and we'll give you 60 seconds to respond.
Yes, thank you. I would like to talk about homeownership in our community. It's really important that we make opportunities for homeownership available to people who want it. And we've been working on that in a number of ways in my administration. We've increased the amount of down payment assistance available to folks who are ready to move into homeownership, and coupled that with homebuyer education. We have worked with the Urban League to get families of color into homeownership, and that's been a very successful program. But we also do need to build more housing opportunities. The economics are difficult on single-family housing, so we need to be looking at condominiums, we need to be looking at attached housing and townhomes. This is something that my Housing Forward Fund is already doing. We are already funding folks in our community to provide affordable homeownership options and other ways of creating innovative housing affordability in our community.
Thank you, Mayor Rhodes-Conway. Allison?
Yes, and this is for you, Mayor. Property taxes continue to rise in the city, and this is something we heard a lot when we asked viewers and readers for questions. Would you offer a plan to mitigate this spike, and what would that look like?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Allison. Actually, if you compare the amount that property taxes have gone up under my administration to the previous 20 years, we're about a percentage point lower than the previous 20 years. So we've been doing our best to hold property taxes down. And part of that is due to the amount of construction that's going on in our community. I'm proud that my administration has approved over 15,000 units of new housing in Madison so that we can mitigate the middle class being driven out of our city by unaffordable housing. It's very important to me that we continue to build housing so that everybody can afford to live in Madison, but it's equally important that we support folks who are low income or perhaps on fixed incomes afford to be able to stay in their homes. So we do have programs to support folks with their property taxes or with home repairs, and we just launched MadCap, which is a program for folks who are income qualified that will support up to $30 a month on the municipal services bill, which people often think of as their water bill. So we're doing what we can to make sure that low-income households can succeed and thrive and stay in Madison.
Thank you, Mayor.
Can I respond to that?
You absolutely can respond. 60 seconds.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the property taxes have gone up significantly. I've talked to many families in our community, our single mothers, our seniors community, those who are live on a fixed income, who are struggling just to stay in their homes. Not only property taxes have gone up, but wheel tax, regressive taxes such as recycling fee. We continue to go back to our residents to pay for these services. And our residents are just, we're running them out of their homes. And so the mayor talks about trying to make have our residents stay in our city, but we're losing them. We're losing them to areas like Wanakee, Sun Prairie, in area districts because they can't afford to stay in our city anymore. And so that's a problem. And so as mayor, I'm going to ensure that I do not continue to the regressive taxes that we have burdening our taxpayers in our city.
Ms. Reyes, thank you. We move on to another topic. Naomi Coles with a question, starting with the mayor.
So focusing more on development for Mayor Rhodes-Conway, you've said in the past that the rapid rate of development on East Washington Avenue, that's a good thing for the city. Residents have also raised concerns, however, about gentrification and big developments taking over the city. So how would you respond to residents who have said maybe they don't want their neighborhood ending up looking like East Wash?
That's a great question. Thank you, Naomi. Not every neighborhood should look like East Washington Avenue, but we do need to create more housing in our community. Our population is growing. Our city is changing, whether we like it or not. And if we continued with the status quo that we had before I was elected, we would continue to see people pushed out of Madison because they couldn't afford to live here. We are about 4,000 housing units behind our population growth, and we need to be creating 2,000 a year to keep up with population growth. My administration has focused on making it easier to build all types of housing across our community. And in some places, yes, that's going to look like 10 and 12-story buildings. In other places, it's going to look like a backyard cottage or maybe a duplex. So we don't want every neighborhood to look like East Washington, but we do want some of them to look like East Washington, and particularly places where there's going to be really good transit service. We would like to have density around high-frequency transit lines so it's easy for people to afford to live and also to get around. My administration has more than doubled the Affordable Housing Fund. We've created hundreds of affordable units in our community, and we're going to continue to make sure that we keep pace with housing construction so that people can stay in Madison and people can move here to enjoy the fantastic amenities that our community has.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Reyes, would you care to share your thoughts?
Yes, I mean, we are definitely in a housing crisis, but not only in a housing crisis, we're in an affordable housing crisis. And we have to really be thoughtful, and we have to lead through crisis. We can't let the crisis manage us and lead us. And that's what's happening today. We're building all over the place without a thoughtful, comprehensive plan with resident voice. We need resident voice. Part of my plan as mayor is I'm going to bring together developers, realtors. I'm going to work with a planning department to identify areas in the city where we can build. Look for buildings like we did at Westgate when I was in the mayor's office, and the development at Westgate Mall. I mean, we have prime opportunities in our city. I agree, East Washington Avenue, the development is great, but our neighborhoods and our residents who I've talked to are really concerned because they have no voice in the process. We need a transparent process, and we need to make sure that we are meeting the needs of housing for all residents in the city.
Thank you, Ms. Reyes. Allison with the next question.
Absolutely. And you touched on this, but if elected, how would you balance new developments in the city and preserving the unique characters that make Madison the city we all know and love?
Is that for me?
Oh, yeah, sorry, for Ms.
Ms. Reyes.
Oh, okay. I think what we need to do is, I was really disappointed when we did the transit overlay district passing in city council and support by the mayor, because we're losing historic districts in our city. And I've been around the city long enough to really understand what these historic districts mean to us as a community. And so we have to balance that. There are areas in the city, as I mentioned before, in that we have opportunities to look in our city on where to plan and develop. We don't have to take away the uniqueness of our neighborhoods in our historic districts. And we have to use all of our tools in our toolbox, land banking, CDBG, CDA, to build homes and build affordable homes. Like I said, it has to be a very thoughtful process, and it has to have neighborhood voice of our residents. Those are the residents who have been living here. They have been paying taxes in our city, and they deserve a voice in this process and what their neighborhoods should look like into the future.
Mayor Rhodes-Conway, 60 seconds to respond.
Thank you. Our planning division does a really fantastic job here in the city of Madison, and part of what they do is create land use plans for our community, whether that's the comprehensive plan, which covers the entire city, or area plans, which cover a district in the city, or even small focused plans that cover, for example, the Oscar Mayer site. And these planning processes are totally driven by the desire to hear from our community. And so when we talk about balancing what our community needs, the character of our community, and building new things, that's exactly the question that gets asked during our planning processes. And so, for example, in East Washington, we had a 10-year planning process where residents got to weigh in and what they wanted to see in that corridor. And in the Oscar Mayer site, we've had a robust planning process that's guiding the kind of development that we'll have there. That's how we do it in Madison.
Mayor Rhodes-Conway, thank you very much. We've changed the discussion now to police funding. We begin with Naomi Coles, and she is directing her first question to Ms. Reyes.
Ms. Reyes, so you have stated your intentions to send additional resources to police. So by how much? Right now they have an $85 million operating budget. By how much would you increase that, and where else in the city budget would you be cutting to allow that increase?
Yeah, great question. It's not about adding more money to the budget. I think, for example, we had a COPS grant that went through the city council, and it was to hire additional officers to do community policing and for our young people in our city. And I was just amazed at how long it took. And this is funding that you couldn't use, right, for anything else. But the city council, in front of the mayor, just talked about how they wanted to use it for other resources. And you couldn't use the COPS grant for other resources. And that's the kind of support that the Madison Police Department needs. I want to be able to support them obtaining COPS grants, other grants, opportunities for them to do their jobs and advance in our community and ensure safety of our residents. And that's just not happening right now. The mayor said nothing and allowed this to go on for hours. And so it is about ensuring that we are increasing staffing needed for the growing population. As we build these developments, we are finding that some developments are causing more increased calls for service, and we need to help support our police department in responding. Not only our police department, but our public health And public health is a response to violence is something I started as deputy mayor. And so we need to continue and balance those, but it's not an either or. We've been in this dialogue for years that we want to defund police, and we talk about this over and over again. We can't defund police, and we need to do both.
Thank you, Ms. Reyes. Mayor Rhodes-Conway, your response in 60 seconds.
Thank you. You know, the police department is just like every other agency in the city. They submit a budget request to the mayor at the beginning of the budget cycle, and it's the job of the mayor to balance what they've asked for against what all the other agencies have asked for. And then at the end of the day, the city council gets to vote on that. My budgets have increased staffing in the police department, particularly for when we absorbed the town of Madison. But we've also granted other requests that I think have been really more strategic. Rather than just adding bodies, we've added a new data analyst who is looking at strategic planning and has had a very positive impact on public safety in our community. We've added capacity for records, which is a real need in the department right now. And we've focused on taking responsibilities off of the police department so they can focus on violent crime, which is what they are best at. So for example, we started the CARES program, which allows folks that are experiencing a behavioral health crisis to be treated by a paramedic and a crisis worker rather than getting a squad car.
Mayor Rhodes-Conway, thank you. We're going to continue this discussion. You might be answering some of the questions just to continue that conversation, but we'll lead into it with a question from Allison.
Yes. And for you, Mayor Rhodes-Conway, how have you balanced calls from residents for police reform with your budget decisions to increase funds for the police department over the past 2 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so to build on what I just said, you know, we have been working with the police department, and particularly with the chief, to prioritize what he sees as the needs for the department right now. And I think he's done a fantastic job at making very efficient use of his resources. And the strategic planning that he's done has resulted in an almost 40% drop in shots fired in our community over the last year, and reductions in traffic crashes and stolen vehicles as well. And that's thanks in part to the data analyst and strategic planning position that was put into my budget. But we also have to make sure that we're paying attention to the many things that our community asked us to do to make a better police department. And I know that's a top priority of Chief Barnes. We've talked about it frequently, and it's something that we work on together and in concert with our civilian committees, particularly the Police Civilian Oversight Board, which now has hired an independent monitor and will be able to get into this work of looking at all of the recommendations that have been made for our police department and seeing which have already been implemented and what still need to be worked on. I think there's plenty of work to do here, but I have a lot of confidence in our chief, and I know he's committed to making the Madison Police Department the best that it can possibly be.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Reyes, would you like to touch on some of these topics?
Yeah, I mean, I think,
60
you know, we do have to balance. I mean, and I balanced it as deputy mayor. I started, as I mentioned, the public health response to violence. I worked with the police department and community groups through the National League of Cities to identify strategies on reducing jail use among young adults. And from that, I provided the recommendation to the mayor before I left to develop a system and a program such as the CARES program. And so I'm glad that we're continuing this effort. We have to balance both. I believe strongly that it's going to take a community, but it's also going to have to take a strong police department, and we need to give them the tools necessary to do their jobs while also lifting up community. When shots fired increased in our city, I brought together the Community Safety Intervention Team, Focus Interruption Coalition, people with lived experience to tackle these issues. And that's how we do it, and we do it together. And we need a collaborative approach. That's why I want to develop an Office of Violence Prevention, so that we can work collaboratively together and look at data on driven strategies.
Thank you, Ms. Reyes. Thanks to both of you for the first part of our discussion tonight. We really appreciate the answers and the conversation. Next, we're going to take a bit of a break from some of these very serious issues. We hope to give voters out there in the city of Madison a chance to know the candidates a little bit better. It'll consist of a series of quick questions for the candidates to answer as quickly as they can. Naomi?
What is your favorite fun about Madison? Ms. Reyes, I'll start with you.
I would have to say Dane dances downtown Madison in the summer months of August.
Wow, the farmer's market on a Saturday morning around the Capitol Square.
And what TV show are you binging right now?
I just finished Project Runway All-Stars.
Ms. Reyes?
I have not been binging because I don't have time, but my team is starting to get me into Veep.
Okay.
What is your happy place in Madison, Ms. Reyes?
My happy place, I would have to say State Street. Definitely State Street.
I have to agree.
And if you had to work outside the public sector, what would your dream job be?
Wow. So my retirement job dream is either to be a jazz singer or to own a bookstore.
I would
Maybe
like
both?
to spend some time writing a book about my life.
Sorry. What's the best piece of advice that you have ever been given?
It's hard to pick one.
Yeah, it is. Stay strong and resilient no matter what. Yeah.
So, former mayor of Minneapolis told me, gave me a piece of advice from a former mayor of St. Paul, which was, it's a really tough job. Make sure you enjoy the fun parts.
That's all we got for now.
All right, that is excellent. It's great to get to know you a little bit better. Some of the questions that maybe you don't always get from reporters every single day. We're going to continue our more serious issue-driven debate now with Naomi and a question about transparency.
So this question is for both of you. Ms. Reyes, you can take the first at this. The city's methods for public outreach include flyers, surveys, public input hearings when big changes are introduced. Still, some big initiatives over the years have come with big complaints from the public that they don't always feel informed. Is the city transparent enough? And if not, what methods would you use to improve transparency? Again, for both, but Ms. Reyes, we'll start with you.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think transparency, we've had transparency in the past 4 years. I've heard that more and more as I'm walking and talking to community residents. I strongly believe that we need people who are going to be out in our community where we hang out. As a woman of color, I am infused in our Black, Latino, Asian communities, and I'm there, not only during election time, but I am there all the time. And I hear many times that they just don't understand what's going on. They don't have the process, and we have to infuse that. We have to identify people within city government to not only work within city buildings. They have to be out in the community. And that's really what I want. I want our civil rights employees to be out in the community. I want our planning department to be out in our community, engaging with residents on the issues that are impacting them. And bring back customer service approach to city government. That has been missing for some time now.
Thank you, Ms. Reyes. Mayor Rhodes-Conway, you can answer this in a full 90 seconds available since the question has been posed to both of you about city transparency and what methods would you use to improve that transparency if it's not transparent enough.
Great, thank you. Well, I think it's always important for us to be working with our community and getting input on everything that the city does. And there's a number of ways that we do that. I just want to mention a few of them that I think are pretty exciting. So of course, I talked about the planning processes already, and where we actually go out and engage with neighborhoods about what they want to see the future of their neighborhood to look like. But one of the things that the Planning Division has started doing over the past several years is actually hiring folks to do that outreach and be out in the community. They also have started paying community-based organizations to get creative and to engage the community through art, through zines, through theater, through all sorts of different innovative ways. We also recently hired in the Department of Civil Rights 3 community connectors whose job is to connect with primary language communities, folks who speak Spanish, Hmong, and Mandarin, and make sure that those communities are really aware of what's going on in the city and that their voices are being heard in City Hall. I was a strong supporter of that program. I'm very excited to have those folks hired and starting to work in our community. We've also really prioritized language access throughout City Hall. We're not doing everything that we should do yet, but we have made big strides to make sure that people speak languages other than English have access to their city government. And there's so much more that we can do to be creative about community outreach.
Mayor Rhodes-Conway, thank you. We mentioned we also had asked for questions from voters out there to submit to our candidates for the discussion tonight. And the question we have from some of them will point out some of our viewers may know a little bit more about the inner workings of city government than others. So this next question comes from one of those individuals. Naomi has this question.
This question comes from Dave Cheslevich. Madison schools are, and this question again is for both of you. In this case, Mayor Rhodes-Conway, we'll start with you. Madison schools are arguably the most important institution in our community, and they are losing students to surrounding districts. Understanding that there is obviously a separately elected school board, shouldn't the mayor, or should the mayor exert some influence and leadership on public school issues? Again, Mayor Rhodes-Conway.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks, Dave, for the question. Yes, absolutely. The mayor has a big role to play in leadership around issues of education and to be in partnership with our school district and our elected school board. And that's something that I've done from the beginning of my term, working with now 3 superintendents and hopeful for a 4th soon. And working with members of the school board on a whole variety of issues, which includes public safety, but also includes issues around literacy and engagement and food access and transportation. So this is something that I do think is actually really important. I also want to mention, though, that one of the issues that our community is facing in losing students is that it's difficult for families to afford to live in Madison. And so this brings us back to the question of housing and making sure that we're creating enough housing for families so that they can stay in Madison and their kids can go to our schools. I'm very excited about the opportunity. I'm not excited to be losing Dr. Jenkins, but I'm excited about the opportunity to bring a new superintendent in. And I've already been talking with the district about how the city can be helpful in making sure we have the best qualified pool of candidates and doing the best we can to attract top talent to the school district. And I plan to be very engaged in the process of finding and hiring a new superintendent going forward.
Mayor Rhodes-Conway, thank you. Ms. Reyes, the same question for you, and you have a full 90 seconds to answer.
Yes, Mayor Dave, thanks for that question. I know you're very, very committed to our public schools. As mayor, I'm going to develop a stronger relationship with our public schools. We not just meeting once a month. As school board president, I supported the increase in community schools. And we need more help within our schools to help support advancing those, bringing city resources into our schools on a day-to-day basis, more of a collaborative approach. We have a city committee right now, education city committee, filled with elected officials. I want to reinvigorate that. Elected officials meet on a regular basis and they talk about issues impacting our public schools. We need residents, we need families, we need parents, we need teachers who are representative on that committee, and that's what I will do as mayor. Reading centers across our city, in our libraries, supporting young people out of school. We have a Madison out of school time, and we have to reinvigorate that to support our students outside of this school. Public safety is a significant concern for me. As we took officers out of our schools, we need to ensure that all of our schools are safe. We just had an elementary school shooting recently, not just our high schools, but our schools across the city. We need to ensure that we are prepared to respond to active shooters in our schools. It's a significant problem across the country, and that's the last thing I want to see as mayor. Thank you.
Ms. Reyes, thank you. And we're going to piggyback on that question with a question from Naomi, beginning with Ms. Reyes.
So to build on what you just said, I want to go back to 2020. You were president of the Madison School Board, and at the time, in summer 2020, you did join your board colleagues in voting unanimously to end the school district's contract with the city to station an officer in all 4 of our high schools. You have said during this campaign, a few months ago on our show For the Record, that you would like to revisit that decision. What has changed your mind since then, and why is it now an issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we were going through a difficult time, right? It was the pandemic. We were public health crisis. We were dealing with what happened after George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis. Tragic. And our environment changed, and that's what leaders do, right? I mean, just because I supported officers in schools, I had to set that aside because our environment changed. Our residents were asking to remove officers in schools. It made no sense for us to keep officers in schools in an environment they were no longer wanted, and we were not in school. So what leaders do is they stop and assess the environment and what we need to do moving forward, and that's what I did. I chaired the safety and security team to ensure that we invested in mental health response, restorative justice in our schools, And so now we've given it some time. You know, I don't have authority over the school district to approve officers in schools, but if a contract came in front of me, I would sign it. As I mentioned, school shootings across the country. We are seeing significant disturbances and fights. I want to, again, support officers in safety, but then also support in mental health and restorative justice practices in our schools. We have been in this dialogue of an either or. Our students are the future of our city, and we need to ensure that they are supported and ensure that that they're safe in our schools.
Mayor Rhodes-Conway, I'd like to get a full 90 seconds to you to respond to this, not so much as a rebuttal, but to just get viewers and voters your thoughts on SROs in our schools.
Yeah, thank you. It's certainly been a topic of conversation. You know, this is a decision that is made by the elected school board, and as you just heard, my opponent was on the school board when the decision was made. It is something that if the school board wants to reopen the conversation, that obviously I would be open to listening to them because it is their decision. But I think more importantly is the ways that we need to be working together to support safety in our schools. And that's something that my administration has been doing, really this whole time. I hope that the school district can make the investments that it needs to make in staff and in safety staff in particular to support our young people. But we have a very strong relationship between the existing school safety staff, our police department, and our violence prevention unit in public health. And that needs to continue and to grow stronger. We also, part of the reason we started the CARES program was because of behavioral health incidents with young people. And so the fact that we now have that alternative dispatched by 911, sending a paramedic and a crisis worker to behavioral health calls, I think is a significant improvement for our community and something that really will benefit our young people and help to keep them safe, but also help them connect with the mental health resources that they need so desperately in this community.
Thanks to both of you. I want to go back to a question I had in my list here earlier, and we begin with Allison with a question for Ms. Reyes. This relates to bus rapid transit.
Absolutely. Ms. Reyes, you have raised concerns that the bus rapid transit system isn't equitable and won't serve residents most in need. Madison's Metro Department has said it's essentially too late to roll back bus rapid transit at this point. So, if elected, what would your plan be to address your concerns with the system?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. There's been a lot of back and forth. You know, one of the disturbing things lately is that we're having a city staff respond with questions during a campaign. You know, the State Journal did a really great piece on transportation. And by the way, I'm endorsed by the Wisconsin State Journal. I shared in that piece that I am in support of a reliable transportation system that is equitable. What offends me most is that we're borrowing $29 million on a system that is inequitable. That will lead us to a $32 million structural deficit. As mayor, I'm going to review the network redesign and the bus rapid transit system to ensure that it's accessible to our low-income, disabled, and traditionally marginalized communities. I'm going to be honest with our community about the data, where it's having a significant impact to our residents that need a transit system the most. We are going to develop a plan that will replace the loss of 3 office buildings downtown, losing 3,000 employees, impacting ridership. I'm going to evaluate the BRT and its impact on the overall budget as we are moving towards a fiscal cliff, and share with our residents the hard decisions that we are going to have to make in the next several years. We are using data, you know, that is from 2020 when ridership was low. We have a process of evaluating data. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's time. We want to give the mayor a question from Allison on the same topic.
Absolutely. And this is for you, Mayor. Do you think there has been a lack of transparency and or equity in the process of establishing bus rapid transit and as well the Metro Transit redesign, which is separate? And how will you address that moving forward?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I don't think there's been a lack of transparency or engagement in this process. And the whole premise of the transit network redesign is that our existing system is inequitable and we need to create a more equitable system. So we've had dozens of public engagement opportunities for both bus rapid transit, which actually started at least 8 years ago, and we've had dozens of opportunities for engagement in the transit network redesign. And in fact, the entire system is based on feedback from our community. And we've done the analysis. The system will benefit everyone, but it will benefit our riders of color more than the general population, and it will also benefit our low-income riders more than the general population. So I do think that we are building equity into our system, which is badly needed, and we're doing it in a fiscally responsible way. We're getting a significant amount of funding from the federal government for the capital expenses for the system, and we've created efficiencies in the plans for the operating of the system so that it will operate in the existing transit budget and not require additional resources on the operating side.
Allison, did you have a question?
Yes, I had a clarifying question for you, Ms. Reyes. You mentioned the fiscal deficit earlier that the city is facing, but you mentioned previously in one of your replies that you didn't want to raise or create new taxes. So I was wondering how you plan on addressing the fiscal deficit that the city is approaching.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, I think what we're going to do is we're going to I'm going to talk to our managers, and we're going to run through a quality improvement process, and we're going to review what's working, what's not in our city. What do we need to invest in, what we don't have to invest in. And with a mind on equity, right? We need the quality of a progressive mayor is that we are fiscally responsible so we can invest in community services, childcare, and public health. And that's where my concern is. We are going to look at the network redesign and the bus rapid transit system and figure out how much that's going to cost us and what we're going to do. And I'm going to share with our community what hard decisions we're going to have to make during the budget time. And that is we're moving into a 32 structural deficit. I'm not going to burden our taxpayers anymore, so we're going to have to make some tough decisions. The mayor has said that staffing is at risk. I don't want staffing to be at risk. We cannot lose jobs or staffing, and I'm going to do whatever I can to minimize that. We are and I said, people need to pay attention to what the budget is. It's critical, and we need to reduce our expenses across the board.
Mayor Rhodes-Conway, your response.
Well, so the way that the budget works is that every agency makes proposals to the mayor, who then evaluates how much we have to be able to spend on our services. And so there's a couple things that I'd point out. Firstly, every city in the state of Wisconsin is facing structural deficits because of what the legislature has done and their failure to increase revenue to cities, which they had promised but have not delivered. And so we have been lucky in the city of Madison because we've had significant growth in our community, and we've been able to close our gaps every year. I've closed the gap every year, and we have a plan to continue to do so. And part of that is through finding efficiencies. And just one example, we are shifting a number of hourly positions into a smaller number of full-time positions, which will save us on hiring and management and create more efficiencies in our community. So we'll plan on continuing to do that work.
All right, thank you to both of you.
Can I respond to that? Or?
Yeah, you know what, 60 seconds only.
Okay, sounds good. I mean, I just want to say, I want to add that we have to do some long-range planning here. Working with the city council and really making tough decisions. But we need to do it together so that they understand when they pass the budget, the implications of their decisions. We can't rely on increase in state aid. We have to be responsible as a city on how we invest. Tax revenue has been flat. We need a strong economic development plan to bring businesses, retain, attract, and grow businesses in our community. So bring revenue back into our city. We haven't done the work post-COVID. We have staffing shortages. Our businesses are struggling. We need to strong economic and bring revenue back into the city. Losing 3 state office buildings is going to impact us significantly, and we need to do some long-term planning on that.
Okay, we want to move on in our discussion to the topic of public safety. And Naomi has a question for both.
So this question for both of you, Mayor Rhodes-Conway, you can take it first. Data shows several categories of violent crime have trended downward in the past year, while other crimes like car thefts are still on the rise. What is your plan to keep Madison's most vulnerable residents safe? Mayor Rhodes-Conway.
Thank you. Yeah, we did experience some very disturbing spikes in certain categories of crime during the pandemic, as did all cities across the country. I'm really happy to say that our trends in Madison are moving in the right direction, and that's thanks in large part to the really incredible work that our police chief has been doing, supported by the resources that my budgets have delivered to him. We have seen now almost a 40% drop in shots fired. We've seen decreases in traffic crashes, but for Kia and Hyundai, we have seen pretty dramatic decreases in car thefts as well. Of course, we know that those two brands have significant vulnerabilities, and that's why the city of Madison is suing those car companies to force them to make their products less easy to steal and provide less of a drain on our policing and our fire resources here in Madison. We need to continue to work in a data-informed and evidence-based way. It's something that the police chief and I agree on. And we are going to be expanding the types of crimes that our department is focused on in a strategic way in the next year. And that's something that I fully support the chief in doing. And have committed to working with him on. I think that we are making progress in our community on public safety, but we can't rest until our entire community is safe.
Thank you, Mayor Rhodes-Conway. Ms. Reyes, 90 seconds to answer the same question.
Great, great question. You know, we are not just every city, right? All cities. I mean, this is Madison. This is the Madison I grew up in. I care about the residents of Madison, and I want to ensure that they're safe. You know, I mean, that's why I want to develop an Office of Violence Prevention, so that we are collaborating. When I was deputy mayor overseeing public safety, we were collaborating. We were using data-driven strategies. We were innovative. I worked with public health. We started public health approach to violence. We started community safety intervention team. We started, really started to work on the background on the CARES team. We really have a lot of work to do. We are seeing trends, drug offenses, burglaries. We're going to work together to find strategies and support a Madison Police Department and support our nonprofits so that they can do their work. As I mentioned, I'm going to go back to this $32 million deficit that we're facing. A progressive mayor is fiscally responsible so that we can invest in the community services, childcare, public safety, public health, all those areas, and it's to have a significant impact on us if we are not able to invest in those services. So it is dealing with the root causes, and also identifying trends like drug overdoses that we're seeing, and we're losing young people to the criminal justice system, and we need to attack recidivism in our community.
Thank you, Ms. Reyes. Let's go to Allison for our next question.
Absolutely. We're going to pivot here a little bit. And this is for you, Ms. Reyes. Do you agree with the reduction of speed limits and changes to some street designs that have been a hallmark of the Vision Zero initiative? And would you continue those efforts if elected?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think, changing the speed limits was very performative. I mean, I think it doesn't tackle these significant issues. I mean, if you look at the data, we had 7 traffic fatalities in 2019. We had 15, 17, and 14. And those were the times during the pandemic. When you look at data on traffic fatalities and when you can determine whether we're trending down or up, it goes by every 100,000 miles. We're not using that data. It's bad data. And so Vision Zero and reducing the speed limits is not making our streets safer. I talk to our residents who take their bike back and forth to work out in the community, our residents. There are significant traffic crashes that are happening in our community. I'm not saying Vision Zero is a program, it's a national program, but we need to develop strategies that works for our neighborhoods, works for our communities, and develop the infrastructure that provides for safe streets.
Thank you, Ms. Reyes. Mayor Rhodes-Conway, a minute and a half to answer that.
Thank you. This is a personal thing for me because I lost my grandfather and my little brother to a traffic crash. And so it's very important to me that no family experience what my family had to experience. And Vision Zero is designed to do just that. It's designed to prevent serious injury and fatality crashes on our streets. And it's working. We're seeing progress. The speed limit reductions in particular have significantly reduced speeds on the corridors where we've brought the speed limit down. I'm not saying everybody's driving the speed limit. I know that most of you probably don't drive the speed limit all the time, but we have seen the highest speeds come down to lower levels, which is really important. And that's not the only thing we're doing to make our streets safer. We're working on education, we're working on significantly increased enforcement, and we're working to redesign our streets to slow traffic down and to make folks safer. This is really important. It's important that we do this in every community, and it's important that we do this in an equitable way. We looked at the data, and over the past 14 years, there had been no traffic calming investments in South Madison. Under Vision Zero and our equity-based approach to traffic safety, we are now making those investments where they're needed in the communities that need them the most. And we're going to continue to make sure that we do that until all of our streets are safe.
Thanks to both of you for answering all of those questions. We are going to finish our question and answer period with another rapid fire, if you will, series of questions so that our voters out there and viewers can get to know the candidates a little bit more. Naomi?
First question, are you an early bird or night owl? Ms. Reyes.
I'm a night owl.
Me too.
Wonderful. And in the zombie apocalypse, where in Madison would you go?
Zombie.
Oh boy. The zombie apocalypse, I'd probably go to the fire admin building. It's pretty secure.
Ms. Reyes?
I can't think of a place to go. I guess, you know, I mean, this is crazy. I'll probably go to the basement of my house and invite my whole family there.
What is an overlooked aspect of the city? Ms. Reyes.
I think equity. I mean, I think oftentimes we talk about equity. I know, is this one of those fast ones?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Equity.
I'm going to take that in a completely different direction. I think that folks maybe don't appreciate all of the programming that we have during the summers. So just for example, in the summertime, we have a farmer's market every single day in the city of Madison, somewhere around our community. You know about the big Saturday one, but there's ones all across our community, and I just think those are really a gem.
One more rapid fire, Naomi or Allison.
Oh, I lost track. What's your favorite snack?
Right now, it's pretzels and cold packed cheese food.
It has to be something sweet, like a Milky Way or something.
Well, we appreciate your humoring us and tolerating our questions there in our rapid fire round. We now want to go to our closing remarks. You each will have 1 minute to offer your closing remarks. And per the rules of the coin toss, we begin with Mayor Rhodes-Conway.
Well, let me start by saying thank you to the three of you, and thanks to everybody for watching tonight. We'll really appreciate you caring about your city. And I hope whatever you thought of the two of us, you will vote on April 4th, on or before April 4th. Madison, I think, has a clear choice in this election. I have demonstrated over the past 4 years my leadership. I've kept my promises to work on housing, on transportation, on climate, on racial equity, and so many more things. If you re-elect me, you'll get a clear-eyed understanding of the challenges and the opportunities that our community is facing, and you'll get evidence-based and equity-driven solutions to build a better Madison for all of us. I'm proud to be endorsed by Congressman Pocan and County Executive Parisi, dozens of elected officials and people in our community, labor, Planned Parenthood, conservation voters. If you'd like to learn more, please visit madison.com and please vote on April 4th.
Thank you, Mayor Rhodes-Conway. 1 minute, Ms. Reyes, your closing argument.
Thank you, Cap Times and Channel 3 for giving this platform to talk about the issues facing Madison. As I mentioned in my opening, I am a longtime Madisonian. I care about the residents of this city, and I'm concerned about its future. You know, I want to lead, I will lead with transparency, engagement, and bring the voices of residents to City Hall. And that's what's the missing piece. And there is a clear choice here today. We have a choice from someone who has committed their entire career to public service and has stepped up and lead in crisis situations, or a mayor who makes decisions behind closed doors and is not transparent in engagement in the issues facing Madison today. We need housing that's more affordable. We need jobs that pay more than a living wage and keep our children and families safe. It's time to have a mayor that will close the racial equity gap in housing, economic, arrest, and education. I am the mayor that will lead our city future and ensure we close the racial equity gaps. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reyes. And with that, we want to thank our candidates, Satya Rhodes-Conway and Gloria Reyes, for being with us today, as well as our panelists, my colleague Naomi Coles from News 3 Now and Channel3000.com, and Allison Garfield of the Capital Times. Election Day is Tuesday, April 4th. We encourage you to exercise your right as an American, have your voice heard, and vote on Election Day. Thank you for joining us.